If you're a small business owner and you feel like you can't step away, if the business only works when you're there, if you got good people, but you still don't trust anyone to run it, this episode is for you. Because most owners don't have leadership problems, they have a dependency problem. The team depends on you, and you depend on the team staying dependent. Today, we're going to be talking about how to develop blue collar employees into leaders, the kind who can actually run the business without you. Rich, I am so glad to have you on the show today. I just want to start right here, right now. And, so how you built and you grew a service business and you coached technicians and salespeople into dependable managers, enough that you were able to actually step back and be able to delegate and not have to be on top of there. You coach technicians and salespeople into dependable managers enough that you were able to actually retire, which is amazing because you look pretty young to me. And how did you pull that off without hiring corporate leaders from the outside?
Well, to be honest with you, I tried it both ways. I tried promoting employees into leadership roles for which they were not prepared. I also tried bringing outside leaders, fully trained leaders, into small business. Neither one of them worked. And so I knew that I had to come up with a different approach if I was ever going to not sell the business, but retire and turn it over to the employees.
Right.
Um, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that's faced by virtually every small business.
Right.
That dilemma of not having the next leadership layer in your company is always a problem. And the
Yeah.
problem with bringing in people from outside is that if they've been trained in a larger environment, and let's say you need an operations manager generally is trained in a larger company. They do one, two, three things a day. They do them well. They do them repetitively. To bring those people into a chaotic, um, maybe disorganized, not so many rules into a small company that's like that, which is how most small companies are, is
Yeah.
devastating. It's hard on them. They get frustrated real early. It's hard on the employees that were passed over for that promotion. Now
Mhm.
they're reporting to an outsider who probably doesn't share their values. Small businesses have unique cultures, and that's one of the most appealing things for me about small business. And when you bring somebody in from outside the culture, it normally fails, not always, but it normally fails. And so that was the realization. It's when you have employees who are steeped in your unique culture, the chance that you can motivate them to become leaders, teach them how to become more than they are. I just thought that was a much more logical approach, and so that's the one that I ultimately took.
I love that. Now, most owners tell themselves, no, no one can do it like me. I'll train them when I have time. It's faster if I do it myself, but the real cost is huge. What is the hidden price of being the bottleneck?
Your organization stagnates when the owner has to do it all or has to do 15 things. We're all good at a few things. We're none of us are good at everything. And so in my case, vision, product development, employee motivation, marketing, those are my wheelhouse. When I get outside that wheelhouse, we're not as good as an organization. If I don't learn to delegate those tasks to
Yeah.
strong people, the organization stagnates. And you know, fortunately, in the HVAC businesses that I have owned most recently, I'm not an HVAC guy. I was a real estate guy by training and just kind of a general business guy. And so when I came into the company, I didn't have any choice but to delegate because
Yeah.
I was not going to be the one to repair air conditioners or install air conditioners. And so I learned delegation at a pretty young business age, fortunately, and that allowed me to do this. So delegation was not foreign to me. I was kind of used to turning over responsibility to other people.
I love that. Now, why do you think owners keep choosing control over freedom?
It's comfortable. Uh, People who own businesses Love the idea that the business is theirs. It reflects on them. It's their identity. Uh, Business owners have egos, and it's kind of fun to think that nobody can do it as well as you can.
Yeah,
Um, my approach is to find people who do parts of it better than I do and turn them loose. I still think I'm better at the overall vision for the business. I'm generally better at marketing, but those are my strengths. I'm better
right,
on the finance side, but those are all teachable, and that's my job. But
right.
I think for the typical business owner, I think that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks there is.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. Now, what's the difference between being a strong operator and being a strong leader?
They can be the same, but not all operators are leaders. Not all business owners are leaders. Not all entrepreneurs are natural leaders. Leadership is a different set of skills. Leadership is learning how to influence people and to move individuals or groups of people in a certain direction toward, common goals.
Yeah,
So you can be a good operator without being a good leader.
right. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think a lot of people they don't recognize that the two are separate, and they try to take on both, and then that's when the problems really occur.
Yeah, I agree completely. And leadership starts with communication. If you're going to influence people, you better be a good communicator.
Right.
It's funny, if you ask 100 business people what's wrong with their organization, 100 will answer communication. And yet, uh, communication is not that difficult. I find that people um, stop when they deliver the message. Here's what I want done. But they forget to find out if their message was heard. They
Hmm.
forget to find out if there are obstacles along the way and kind of check progress. They forget to set a timetable. Here's when this communication will be complete, when this task is finished. And then they kind of forget to come back and circle around and say, did we get done what we intended to get done? So you
Yeah.
wind up saying, well, I told them to do it. Well, that's just the start of communication. That's not the whole circle. And I'm a big believer that you have to circle around on communication, um, just with all the steps that I just mentioned.
Right. Now you wrote a book. Your book, Rowan, Your Own, is built around practical leadership principles for small businesses. Now let's simplify it. When you say grow your own leaders,
Mhm.
what does that mean day to day?
We took 8 people in our 50-person organization. We felt like all 8 of them had the potential to become leaders. And I had determined that I did not want to sell the business, that I really wanted to pass it on to the employees. Um, Out of those 8, 6 became part of the leadership team that now runs the company. Um, One simply didn't want to put in the work to become a leader. Another simply wasn't able to grasp the concepts of being a leader. The
Hmm.
others, all in different ways, each had limitations. Each had something that was keeping them from being a leader. We identified what those ceilings on their leadership ability were, and then we began to help them move through that ceiling. It took 2.5 or 3 years for us to get to the point where I could step back. But gosh, it's well worth it. The
Yeah.
the principle. I didn't set out to write a book. As a part of the leadership training program, I realized that something was missing, and I began writing blogs every 2 weeks on just random leadership subjects, and they liked them. It still didn't accomplish any magic. And then the general manager said, "I think in our weekly management meetings, I'm going to have them read the blogs together, and we're going to spend 20 minutes out of the hour talking about the blogs." And once we got them engaged on the blogs and these simple principles of leadership, the program really took off. They began holding each other accountable, and I think that was one of the most powerful parts of it. Well, at the end of a couple of years, I'd shared about all the management secrets that I was capable of sharing. I read through the blogs and I said, if for no other reason than just a legacy project, I'm going to publish these as a book. I'm going to
Mhm.
leave them with the employees. Then my entrepreneurial nature took over, and I said, I think this information is good enough. I'm going to take a run at sharing it with as many wannabe leaders, would-be leaders, young leaders as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing now. It's just I'm just in the start of my retirement. But boy, it's fun. I love sharing this message, and your podcast is one of the ways we're doing that.
I love it. I love it. And I think people need to understand more about how to, gain that leadership or really bring out the strengths in themselves so they could be able to really, help each other as a team and keep each other, the number one thing, accountable, because sometimes people, go off track. Now, what exactly does a business owner do differently than their employees?
Oh, there's an old saying about working in the business versus working on the business. I think employees are always working in the business.
Right.
Strong owners learn to work on the business. They learn to take that 30,000 foot view of their business and identify strengths and weaknesses that if you're immersed in the business on a daily basis, it's really difficult to do that. But
Yeah.
really effective leaders, really effective business owners can separate from the business and just be brutally honest about what's working and what doesn't work. I think
Right.
that's probably the key difference.
I agree with you 100%. Now, how do you spot leadership potential in a blue collar team?
I think it goes for any team, and I use sports analogy on this question a lot. If you go to a sports team and you're in the locker room, there are the stars, and then there are the leaders. Sometimes
Hmm.
they're the same, but often they're not. In an organization, it's the same way. There's an unofficial pecking order, and if you're an observant leader, you know who those leaders are, even
Right.
though they don't carry titles. You know who the employees look up to, who they go to for information. Those are the people that are going to make up your leadership team. And at that point, you have a frank conversation with them and say something is holding you back. You may not have an interest in leadership, and some people don't. And then
Yeah.
when people find out what leadership is and the amount of accountability and the amount of work that goes into being a good leader, then
Yeah.
sometimes they say, that's just not who I want to be. But
Right.
the other people who say, gosh, I never thought of myself as a leader, but I like what you're talking about. Tell me more. Those are the ones that are going to succeed in the program. And when you unlock that, I think that's the most fun part of being a business owner is developing people.
I love that. Was it hard for you to really, take a step back and help these people really develop their strengths and their leadership qualities?
No, it's I had I had run the companies for such a long time. I was ready for something other than day to day, and this really fit the bill because it solved my own problem. But it also I'd always been connected to the employees. I knew their strengths, I knew their weaknesses. I knew in most cases I knew their families, and I knew what made them tick. And to be able to really spend time on doing this by the time I was able to do that, I was working through a general manager. So, somebody who is trying to make their business survive doesn't have time to do this. And
Yeah.
I make no bones about that. There were a lot of years where I couldn't have taken time to do leadership development. But no, I think it was a fairly natural skill. I like communicating. I like interacting with the employees, and this was just a natural extension of that.
I love that. Now, how do you build confidence without creating ego?
Um, Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it gets away, and we've had that. I believe that you build confidence by giving employees small projects, non-critical projects, delegating them, watching how they perform. And they're not going to get everything right. If they get 80% of the project right, you have something to work with, and it's time to give them a little bit more responsibility. Um, I think you model humility. I think you model transparency. Those things kind of keep egos in check for the most part.
Right.
But still, there are those that where ego gets away. And I it I think you just are very frank and talk with people about when when your ego isn't in check, you're just not going to be as effective with your employees
Right.
influencing them as you want to be.
I agree. Now, how do you teach decision making, not just task completion?
Decision making is hard. It's and it kind of goes back to what I just said about delegating small tasks. You have to build confidence in their decision making. There are people who are fearful decision makers, and fearful decision makers fail most of the time. They
Hmm.
either make bad decisions for the wrong reasons or they can't pull the trigger. They can't make a decision. When you run across someone who manages from a position of fear, it's very seldom fixable in my history. There may be people out there that are good at doing it. I'm
Yeah.
not one who is. So when I see consistent fear in decision making, I get real concerned about that employee's ability to move forward.
Right. Oh, I agree. If someone is listening who wants leaders, not helpers, what are the core principles?
The core principles contained in the training course and in the book are communication, accountability, proactivity, um, building the ability to build a culture based on strong shared principles. And then the final one is, and it has to do with innovation, but the first step in innovation is gathering knowledge. I was very fortunate early in my career to be encouraged to start reading. I didn't know a lot about business. I guess it was obvious to my boss that I didn't. He said, if you'll start reading five periodicals a week, business periodicals, and if you read the Wall Street Journal every day, said that gap in your knowledge is going to be filled pretty quickly. He
Yeah.
was right, and it encouraged me to begin reading far outside the initial recommendation. 52 years later, I'm still spending about an hour and a half a day gathering knowledge. And
Right.
I think that has made me a far more effective leader. I understand why people do what they do. I understand why they think like they think. I understand a lot about the world. And it affects every part of my life. And so when we find people who aren't willing to start gathering knowledge, we know that they're going to hit a wall somewhere along the line, and they're not going to be a very innovative leader. So those are the core principles contained in the book.
I like that. Now, how do you teach someone, to think not just not just a follower, not just to follow instructions, but actually teach them how to think?
Ooh, I may need to think about that question. That's a good one. Um, we do a lot of reinforcing people. I guess when people have confidence, and when they're supported, they begin to achieve more than they ever thought they could.
Yeah.
We have a lady that I love to talk about in our company. She came in as a dispatcher. She was so closed off, and she really wasn't a great employee. She was a good employee. She did her job, but we just didn't see a whole lot of future. I have a different connection with every employee in the company, in fact, with everybody in my life. And I
Yeah.
wasn't able to break through with her. I just decided I'm going to be me. She didn't want to talk about family. She didn't want to connect really. And that's okay, but I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit interacting with her. And it took a year. And one weekend, she came in on a Monday and was laughing about an interaction that she'd had with an official on the football field who had called something she thought incorrectly for her son.
Yeah.
And I had had a similar experience, actually more than one in my past, and we connected over that.
Hmm.
And it unlocked something in her, and she began to kind of take her mask off. And we found that she was capable of great things. She's now a
Right.
supervisor in the company. Um, she started thinking and she started sharing her thoughts. It was really, really fun to watch, and it's fun to interact with her today because she's a totally different person. I think
Yes.
in her case, I think we gave her the confidence to think and to share her thoughts, And we were so impressed by her thoughts when we learned them that that encouraged her to share more thoughts. And she's
Right.
still accomplishing great things and moving forward. Maybe that's an example that gives an answer to your question.
No, it definitely does. It definitely does. So, how do you correct without crushing people? Because a lot of people get really super sensitive.
I mentioned earlier about transparency, and I'm a pretty transparent person. I acknowledge my weaknesses, and my failures. And I think when you create an environment in the company that allows for that, and when the the leader is embodies those characteristics, then I think it's easier for people to understand. I'm real big on just telling the truth and building. The organization is built on integrity, and when they see that in me, I think they tend to trust me. So I
Mm,
can deliver, if they trust me, I can deliver bad news just like I deliver good news. If they know that when I tell them it was a mistake, I wish that had not happened. Here's what I'd like to see in the future. It wasn't a critical mistake. We're
hmm
still in business today,
hmm
but we have an agreement on how the future is going to play out. And
Right.
I won't say we're tolerant of mistakes that are accidents. We are not tolerant of repetitive mistakes or mistakes that
Right.
come out of laziness. But we don't beat people up because they had a bad day.
Yeah.
But we explain how serious the transgression was. So
Right.
that's how we do it. We criticize privately. We don't criticize publicly.
Right.
And we praise publicly. That's one of those foundational kind of beliefs that leads to building a good, strong culture.
Right. Now, owners get scared to train because training feels like slowing down, but not training guarantees you to stay stuck. So what's the realistic approach?
One of the differences in my book and typical leadership books is that my book is written for people who are not academic. They're not theoretical. The book turned out to be 35 2.5 page chapters illustrating one simple principle in each chapter. And I think in small business, I think that's the way to approach this.
Yes.
One small morsel at a time. I was listening to a relatively famous leadership book on while I was out for a walk the other day, and I thought there all of this information is dynamite.
Yeah.
My people would never read or listen to this book. So mine is just very simple. It is written for small business people who don't have the time to read a 400-page academic approach to why leaders do what they do. I'm
Right.
not a terribly deep person, and so the book is not terribly deep, but it's meaningful and it's
Right.
practical. You can read a chapter in my book and go that afternoon and put that idea in place and see improvement immediately.
I love that. I love that. Now, how do you develop people while still hitting numbers?
Oh, I think those two are very related. We can hit better numbers when we have better people, and we can delegate more tasks and leverage our time when we have developed leaders to take on those responsibilities. We see the benefits of that every single day. So I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think it's all intertwined.
I love it. I love it. And I think you're right. I think you're right. I think sometimes the myth is people think, well, if I take time to train, it's going to take time away from working with clients or closing deals or doing other things. But in the long run, it's actually going to help you. I agree 100%.
Yeah, you cannot get there relying on your own talent.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's one of the things when it comes to startup businesses also is that they try to do everything. And that's why a lot of startup businesses fail. And you really need to, like you said, delegate and teach leadership to others and be able to really, show people, their strengths and how they could utilize them to help run the business so you don't have to get burned out.
It's hard for a founder to know when the time is to start doing things differently than the things he did that led to the success. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that gets in the way. There are times when it got in my way. Well, gosh, we were doing it differently. We were doing it because I came up with the idea. We're not going to move away from that idea, are we? And you have to have a clear vision of what really got you where you are and where
Right.
what will get you where you're going. And once you have that clear vision, it makes it easier.
I agree. Now, what does training look like in the real world and not a classroom?
We in this leadership team, we met regularly discussing real issues. We always had issues that we could talk about. I've said this before, but we're not theoretical. We are outcome oriented leaders.
Hmm.
And we always trained around core concepts. Anytime anybody showed any interest in leadership, we took them up on it. And as I said earlier, even if we delegated a very small task, we were able to observe how they responded to that challenge. Some failed, many progressed.
Yeah.
Some would progress and reach a point that they didn't want to go past. That's okay. But I think training is going on all day, every day, but it starts with delegation. And if you can't turn loose of even small tasks, training's pretty difficult.
Yes, I agree. Now, how do you build leaders in a high turnover industry?
Well, we've turned it into a not high turnover industry, to be honest with you. Our whole success model starts with culture. We provide exceptional service, and we do it through the empowerment and support of our employees. That's
Hmm.
made clear in the interview process. It's made clear every single day in the company. And there are not very many businesses in our industry who believe what we believe, and who operate with a level of integrity that we do. So when we find employees who fit that culture, the idea of leaving for 50 cents an hour or a dollar is far less attractive. There's plenty of opportunity in our
Yeah.
company for them to become something that they never dreamed about being. So
Right.
our turnover is far less than the average in the industry.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Now you were ready to step back and you have stepped back, and that's everyone's dream. Like this is the dream for business owners. Like you don't want to abandon the business. You want to stop being trapped by it. And what has to be true before you can step away? What are some of the things that you feel, you need to have? Like what roles, must be filed internally and so forth?
Because I know the leadership team so well, and the gentleman who was the general manager is now the president of both companies. He and I still meet offsite once a week.
Hmm.
Um, I have visibility into the business through our software, so I can know as much as I want to know.
Right.
As I said earlier, I'm kind of a natural delegator, so I'm not, I don't overmanage, I don't micromanage. I think he enjoys our weekly meetings as much as I do. They
Yeah.
only take about 45 minutes, and he does a good job. And as long as I'm confident in that, he also will say, I didn't realize that finance was a problem for me. What would you do on this? He's not embarrassed to ask questions, which makes our
Yeah.
relationship very, very simple. If he was someone who had said, "It's my baby now, and I'm not going to share information with Rich," we'd have a problem with that. But
Yeah.
fortunately, he's not that guy. And
Right.
so having strong leaders is what made it possible. But also, I didn't walk totally away. I'm still in a chairman's role, but I don't go on site, but once every quarter, for a financial review, and I do that by design. It's not that I don't miss the employees, because I do, but it would be disruptive and it would undermine his leadership, and I don't think that's fair.
Right.
But back to, if I didn't have the confidence in the team and in the leader of the team, I would never have been able to step away to the degree that I have.
Right. I like that. Now, what decisions must be delegated in order to be able to step away?
Well, everything. Again, delegation doesn't mean you don't have visibility. Uh,
Hmm.
One of the failures of delegation, as a matter of fact, is turning things over and walking away. It's like communication. If you don't check on things, if you don't, if Steve and I don't have agreement on timetables that things are going to be done, if he doesn't report back to me on the obstacles that he sees, if he
Yeah,
were to let things get in trouble and then come to me in a panic, you know, he hasn't done a good job of accepting the delegation. I haven't done a good job of monitoring his progress. And
yeah,
so, again, delegation is not the same as walking away. In fact, successful delegation means you don't walk away, but you do
right.
watch and I don't give answers when people ask me a question that on something I've delegated. I may give suggestions to head them in the right direction. They've got to find the answer on their own. And
Yeah,
I think that's important so that people continue to develop.
I love that. Now, what owner habits, do you have to change?
You mean in retirement?
Yeah.
If you're a micromanager, it'd be good to get out of the micromanagement business, right away. And that is not a problem of mine, and so I haven't had to face that. You know, you the transition is a little odd. Fortunately, I have something to do right now. I'm marketing the book and the training course and doing some speaking.
Yeah,
That's all fun for me, and it's a new experience, and so that keeps me engaged. If I didn't have that, if I hadn't prepared for this time,
right.
this would be a real awkward time for me. And your natural tendency is go back to what check
Yeah,
on the business. How's the business
yeah.
doing?
Hmm.
I'm glad to be distracted at this point because that would not be fair to the team.
Right. Now, what's the biggest mindset shift that you have to make during retirement or the real freedom? What is actually possible in order to make it happen?
Another really interesting question, because if you're an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. You don't shut it off because you retire. I said earlier, I turned the book into an entrepreneurial exercise, probably not surprising. When I see my friends who have retired that are entrepreneurs, if they don't have a new venture, they struggle. And so
Right.
I knew that was going to be my struggle, and I made sure I had something to do. And I'm going to do some things in retirement that are not related to the HVAC business. Probably go back and do a little real estate, which was my first background.
Hmm.
Uh, I think you have to prepare yourself in that way. Fortunately, I have some active grandkids I can chase around, so that's another fun thing. I did find early on that I didn't want to play any more golf than I already play because I don't want to be miserable all the time. And golf
Right.
golf defines me in a not so positive way. So you I think retirement requires you to know yourself pretty doggone well before you
Right.
just charge off. Because I am not somebody who likes traveling and some of the things that people look forward to in retirement. So so far so good.
I love it. Now, where can people find your book and how can they get a hold of a copy?
The website for the book and the training course is growingyourown.net. I love to interact with people directly. If they want to email me, the email address is rich@growingyourown.net. And then I don't do a lot of social media, but I am active on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I would love to have more followers.
I love that. And before we go, can you tell us a little about your course?
Yes, the course is a condensed version of what I taught. Right now, I am only doing it on site. So I go to businesses and I teach them over 2 days. I teach their leadership team in three 2-hour sessions. And then there's coaching ongoing by Zoom after that. And we're still early in that. I feel good about the early results.
Yeah.
But I hope to be able to do more and more of that. I also speak to groups and about the whole concept of developing a leadership team in your small business. I
Hmm.
love doing that. So all of that information again is available on the website, growingyourown.net.
Oh, I love that. Now, before we go, if you could take three things that you'd like people to walk away with today and remember that you feel will make a big impact in their life when it comes to business, what are three things you want people to remember from this episode?
Remember that leadership is ultimately about influencing people, and that the skills that lead to influence are the ones that you need to master. I would say the second one is, I mentioned earlier, gather knowledge. Learn how to build your knowledge base. And for everybody, it's a little bit different. If you're not a reader, thank goodness for podcasts and audiobooks. Uh, you know, I usually combine exercising and driving with listening to podcasts and audiobooks, so I get two benefits at the same time. And
Mhm.
then the third is it's about people. And if you're not a natural connector with people, I don't think you can ever be as effective as a leader as someone who genuinely connects with people. And I'm not talking about knowing their name. I'm talking about knowing who they are and letting them know who you are. I think that's the grounds for transparency that's so powerful in leadership. So those would be my three.
Oh, I love it. And I just want to say, people, you don't need more hustle. You don't need a leadership pipeline because freedom isn't built by working harder. It's built by building people. And Rich Ashton is the author of Growing Your Own. It's a practical guide drawn from real life experience and training developed inside a small business. And we're going to include Rich's information, all the things that you need to know about his book, about his business, training, and about the course. And you'll find that in our notes. And if this episode has resonated with you, and it hit home, follow the podcast because we don't just talk about business problems here, we solve them. Rich, this has been such a pleasure. I am so happy that you came on the show. This is an issue that, we talked about, small businesses, but, all businesses can take your book and take the principles in your book and apply them to their own. And it could actually help all the different types of businesses from startups to medium-sized businesses to large businesses, because I feel that the information you provided today really applies to all. And I think one of the key factors that you were talking about that really struck me is the communication factor. And I feel that we need communication, like you said, we need to know the people we're working with, and not just on a name basis, but on a personal basis. And I think when that happens, you could really bring a lot of gifted good out of that person and really make that person feel the worth in them. And that I think helps people grow as well.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Stacey. I think you picked all the important things out of the conversation. It was thoroughly enjoyable. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. You have a great day.
You do the same.